I'm gonna hunt you down, Cooper. You can't run forever.
Sly Cooper and the Thievius Raccoonus. The final one of the 3 mascot platformer introductory games that I'm going to cover, and I did a bit of research on these games before I played them, because I wanted to know what people felt about them. And the general consensus was this was the one that people seemed to like the least, and it was the most divisive of the titles. And I kinda see why. Not to say it's bad or anything, but it tries to take sort of like 2 concepts, and it doesn't really put a huge amount of time into either. The story follows Sly Cooper, the heir to the Cooper clan, a group of master thieves. Just as he was about to receive his gift of the Thievius Raccoonus, a book on how to be a master raccoon thief, a bunch of people break in, kill his parents, destroy his book, and leave him an orphan. Now he's grown up to become a master thief himself, trying to track down the book and get revenge on his parents' murder. Along the way, he is aided by his 2 buddies, Bentley the hyper-intelligent turtle, and Murray the driver and giant waste of space of a hippo. And seriously, hippos are horrendously dangerous creatures. This guy should be way more useful than he is. Learn to fear the water horse, damn it. Now, the story as a whole is pretty formulaic. In fact, you could say that about the gameplay as well. And what I mean is, the game is divided into various chapters, and each one has the same basic plot structure. You start with the introductory of the villain that you're hunting down in this chapter, given his backstory and how they came to become a villain. Then you're taunted by them once or twice in the levels. Then you fight them, you beat them, and then they say, well, you beat me, but you won't beat the next guy because he's even greater than me. And then they provide you with their location, and then you move on. Oh, and occasionally you will run into Sly's love interest / nemesis, Interpol agent Carmelita Fox. A love story for the ages, I'm sure. The thing is, while the way the story is fed to you is very formulaic by design, it's not poorly written or anything. The backgrounds for each of the villains at least gives you an idea of who they are as people instead of just generic bad guys that you have to get because, trust us, they're bad. And honestly, I actually ended up kind of feeling for one of them after hearing their backstory. That was kind of cool. But the real focus in terms of story and plot development are the characters. While the character arcs in this game are at best minimal to non-existent, the characters themselves are really well written. They're very believable as like actual living, breathing characters, and they're just straight up likable. Sly and his teammates work great off each other, and you really feel like they make one cohesive unit. And the banter between Sly and his nemesis or his enemies, it just works excellently. And Sly as a character is just fantastically written. He's quick, he's witty, he's legitimately funny, and he's got that whole gentleman thief thing down, and personally I've always found myself quite fond of those kinds of characters. And here he's written incredibly well. Basically, while the story is handed to you in a sort of piecemeal fashion in a very predictable way, you still find yourself kind of engaging with it because the characters are well written, they're interesting, and they're believable. You really do think by the end that they are living, breathing people, even the villains, and that's great. The story as a whole, maybe not so much, but the characterization, excellent. Now, like I said with this story, the gameplay is also kind of formulaic, and that is basically in how the greater level structure works. Essentially, each individual level is split up into several stages. The key goal of each stage is to find a key. If you find enough keys, you can unlock the second half of the level, where you can proceed to get more stages, unlock more keys, then finally unlock a thing that lets you challenge the boss, which gives you a page of the Thievius Raccoonus, which gives you a new ability that will be used a lot in the next stage. And while the overall level structure is basically the same from level to level, the individual stages do offer a little bit of variance. For example, you might get like one of those mini-game stages, and I'm not even going to begin to lie, are absolutely the low point of the game. You don't play Sly Cooper as a driving simulator. These stages are mandatory, and while they're not wildly difficult or anything, they are kind of buggy and not the most fun. Case in point, I don't think I actually have footage of this, unfortunately, but I managed to beat a twin-stick shooter stage, only to have the prize not actually show up. And I was actually stuck in there until I left. That was fun. Going to the whole main focus of the regular levels here, I kind of came in here with sort of the wrong idea. I knew this game was going to be a platformer, but I figured it would be more of a stealth sort of situation. And while there is, in the loosest sense of the terms, some stealth elements, it's definitely more of a platformer than anything. The idea is simple: you run, you jump on platforms, you hit enemies with your cane, although combat in this game is kind of awful. And if you see blue sparkles on something, you can hit the circle button, which will let you sneakily interact with them. And that's great, except in how the way this game tutorializes that last bit. Because every time you get a new page of the Thievius Raccoonus from a boss fight, it gives you a new thing you can interact with. But the thing is, they tell you this every single time, and it's always the exact same thing. If you see blue sparkles on something, press O. It just recontextualizes all the new things that might have sparkles on it. It's like, look game, I get it. There are sparkles. Press O, you do a thing. You've been telling me this since before the game even really began. Stop telling me all these things. You're talking down to me as if I'm a 5-year-old. Stop it! There are also additional abilities you can have mapped to the triangle button, but you have to unlock them by getting various collectibles, and not really many of them are all that useful. The main focus of each level is to avoid detection, although that's really not all that big a deal, and ultimately platform your way to finding a key to unlock a padlock to advance through the greater overarching world. Now, aside from just platforming, there are the stealth elements, which are really, really underutilized, because while the platforming is alright, the stealth aspect of this thieving game is pretty half-baked. Because stealth elements come in 3 flavors. You either see spotlights, where if you walk into them they turn red and an alarm blares, and traps are switched on, I guess. You see an enemy with a flashlight, and if you step into that flashlight, well, you're basically dead because enemies are really, really good at hitting you, and you are really not good at combat. And you can find, like, bright yellow laser tripwires, which, when stepped on, turn red after about 2 seconds and kill you. But in that 2-second time, you can stand on them all you like with no real repercussions. Likewise, there's an alarm system tied to the lasers and the spotlights, and once that goes off, you can just smack it, and then suddenly all of that stuff gets turned off permanently. And that's not a bad solution to, say, getting to one part of a level, falling, and having to go back and restart, because suddenly all the areas you've proven you've gotten past have suddenly no obstacles, which is great. However, it doesn't make a lot of sense from a stealth game because you've activated an alarm. Why is absolutely no one checking in on this? In fact, very little in terms of stealth really works in this game. You can't really sneak up on enemies because no matter how slow you go, as soon as you get right behind them, they automatically detect you. And then you have to smack them before they kill you, because the one thing they did well in this game in terms of stealth is they give you 1 health. The whole point of stealth is you can't really afford too much to screw up before really feeling the impact of your mistakes. And you know, that's great, but that's like the only actual stealth element in here that feels like an actual stealth element. The rest just feel like they were kind of tacked on without any real thought. And that's not the only thing that feels tacked on without any real thought, because let's talk about the collectibles in this game. First of all, you have Lucky Charms. These are these little horseshoe type things. You can collect 2 at a time, and they give Sly 1 extra hit, which I guess could be useful, except unless you get targeted by enemies, in which case you're probably dead because you're surrounded and they are really, really mean. There are also coins, and if you collect 100 of these coins, you will get a Lucky Charm. I kinda like this though. Instead of giving you an extra life, which you can get a lot of them anyway, it just gives you an extra hit of damage, which means if you get to a really difficult part, it helps to actually have picked up all these really kind of semi-pointless, mindless collectibles. The last collectibles in this game are the bottles, and these are kind of weird. In each stage there's a bunch of these notes and bottles hidden about, some of them in really clever spots. They really like to utilize the various corners and bits of geometry to hide some of them. And if you're not really looking, you'll probably only find like 90% in each level. It will allow you to crack a safe hidden in the world, which will give you usually a piece of the Thievius Raccoonus, which will give you a new move, or a blueprint which will show you the locations of all the other bottles in all the other levels. Definitely clever to give you something that you have to earn that helps you further complete the game by helping you find other stuff. I like that. The problem is the way these bottles are set up and the other rewards. While you can collect the bottles, until you have all of them, you can't interact with the safe, which is weird. I mean, I would think if I played through the game and I know the combination to each safe, I would think I would just be able to access the safe and put in the code and steal what was inside. But instead, no, collecting all the bottles just gives you the ability to interact with the safe, and then the game just gives you the password. I would alternatively propose that you have to find codes hidden like within the level, and then like manually input them into the game. That way you're not held back by whether or not you can't find one bottle, as opposed to just cleverly, integrating the codes to each of these safes within the actual level proper, and having cracking the safe be an actual integral gameplay element. But in short, the safes were dumb. And the other problem with them were the rewards, because you basically got pages from the Thievius Raccoonus which gave you extra abilities, but most of them not only felt like an afterthought, they felt like they weren't a thought at all. I mean, let's just go over a few of them. You get a magnet that attracts coins if you get close to them. Okay, but I can just swing my cane and collect them that way. And that seems like a far more effective thing because the magnet is incredibly weak. You have the ability to roll into a ball and move faster. Except that the ability to roll into a ball is at the mercy of the physics engine, which I'm pretty sure is still the one they used on Rocket Robot on Wheels on the N64, and also, as a stealth game, going fast isn't really the best idea. Although, I think at this point we've pretty effectively talked about how this isn't really a stealth game. You have a dash attack, which is actually probably the most practical attack method in the game because it's faster than swinging your cane and far more fluid and practical. However, because this is so much better than the completely imprecise method of flailing your stick about and hoping you kill things, it kind of invalidates pretty much every other aspect of combat now, doesn't it? Oh, you've got an electric field that will surround you when you curl up into a ball and then get flung about by the physics engine. The power-ups in this game were definitely an afterthought because honestly, most of them are pretty much pointless. And at the end of the day, it just felt like the developers were sitting there thinking, okay, we got these levels, and we got these coins you can collect, which will give you an extra health. That's great. But the levels feel pretty empty. Let's add a bunch of things. Great! Oh, but there should probably be a reason why we collect all these things. Alright, give them power-ups! Except that the power-ups are pretty much worthless. At best, they're situational, and I've honestly not seen too many situations where they were useful. Basically, gameplay-wise, if you want a fun platformer, you'll probably like this, but you have to be willing to put up with like the 1 degree of actual stealth in this game, which does slow the platforming down a little bit. So if you like fun, fast platforming, you're probably going to be annoyed by this. And likewise, if you're like me and you came into this expecting a stealth game, you're probably going to be disappointed immensely. Now, the overall presentation to Sly Cooper and the Thievius Raccoonus is excellent, but not without its issues. All the characters look great and well developed. I kinda like how Sly's a throwback to the stylized look of the villain from Rocket, referencing their previous work and ultimately killing my hopes of ever seeing a sequel to Rocket. Damn it, make another Rocket, Sucker Punch. Stop making Infamous, it sucks. All the villains are uniquely designed, all the standard enemies are really unique and clever and colorful. I love that. I love how the characters are designed with this sort of bright, exaggerated, cel-shaded look. However, and this is where it falls flat, because the characters pop so much with that sort of bright, exaggerated, cel-shaded look, the backgrounds and the environments kind of fall flat by comparison, because it feels like they were designed to look a little bit more realistic. And this in turn means that the characters definitely stand out, but all of the backgrounds just kind of blur together and are not terribly interesting. Still, there's enough here that's unique visually to say that it was pretty good. And as a nice little added bonus, they have these really well-produced looking comic book-like segments for the various cutscenes for background information for the characters. And I really like that stuff. It looks good and it matches the cel shading quite nicely, making this feel like a nice comic booky game. But, man, fix your backgrounds, damn it. Audio-wise, this game it's okay. The voice acting is fantastic. Like I said, Sly is a really likable character, and he's well voice acted. I don't think he would have been half as likable with anyone else playing Sly as whoever they got to play him. All the other characters are really well played and memorable. Even the villains, who feel like they're voice acted to a point where they're trying to be annoying, are pretty likable and memorable, and ultimately it helps breathe life into these characters. I mean, I've said it before, but these characters do feel alive, and the voice acting sort of makes them feel even more so. The overall soundtrack to this game, it's not bad, but it's not really all that memorable. In fact, the only thing I really found terribly memorable about the soundtrack, if you can even call it part of the soundtrack, was the fact that they added a plucking string sound for every one of Sly's steps when he's sneaking around near enemies. I really like that. It makes it feel kind of cartoony and clever. But the rest of the soundtrack, I genuinely don't remember really any of it. But it helps create a well-rounded package with the visual design, creating a nice overall presentation. Now, if you want to get a copy of Sly Cooper and the Thievius Raccoonus, it's pretty cheap actually. You can find it for as low as like $5. And for that price, I'd say grab it. It's pretty good. You can also get this on the Sly Cooper HD collection, which is what I've got it on, which is available both physically and digitally, which costs a little bit more, but again, you're getting 3 games, plus it's been HDified and given like true achievements if you care about that. Regardless, I think you're getting a good deal with Sly Cooper and the Thievius Raccoonus. It's a good game, it's not expensive or anything, and it's a fun little platformer. Honestly, if you like 3D platformers, I'd say give this one a whirl. Like I said, this one does seem to be the most divisive of the 3, and I get why. It's kind of sort of trying to be a stealth game, but they really didn't focus all that much on it, and it feels kind of half-baked in that respect. And as a platformer, while it certainly does it, it feels like a lot of smaller aspects, such as like the collectibles and stuff, were kind of only half thought through. But that said, the story and the characters are quite likable, and the platforming itself is excellent. So if you're looking for a 3D platformer, I'd say check out Sly Cooper and the Thievius Raccoonus. It's not expensive, and so long as you're not looking for a full-on stealth game, you're probably going to enjoy this one. Just keep in mind, it's a little bit slower paced to try and incorporate a bit of stealth, but the very minuscule amount of stealth does not encroach on the platforming, like, at all. It's definitely not the stealth game I kind of thought it was, but for a 3D platformer, I would say I definitely like it, almost as much as Jak and Daxter, and I love it infinitely more than Ratchet and Clank, mainly because there's no grinding in this game. It's just fun platforming with a really likable character.